Starting off at number 10 now, we have The Shed. Reddit user MicroThrowaway64 told a story about how he lived in a converted shed out in the country, just him and his dog. The shed always had a bit of a weird vibe to it, but nothing could have prepared him for what followed. One night, he was on his computer with his dog asleep next to him. He needed to pee, so he went outside. As he was admiring the night sky, he heard the shed door slam behind him. He tried to open it, but the door that usually opens with ease just wouldn't budge an inch. He heard his dog growling inside and begin to bark as he desperately slammed against the door with his full weight. The dog's barks turned into whines, then whimpering, then silence. Finally, the door just flew open. It was pitch black inside and the lights wouldn't turn on. He found the dog in the corner of the room, eyes closed and shaking violently. He grabbed his dog and ran as fast as he could, swearing to never go back to that shed again. Next up at number 9 now, we have The Watcher. A Reddit user said that one night she went to bed as the only person in her college dorm, or so she thought. She woke up in the middle of the night to the realization that a man was standing over her bed watching her. Without hesitation, she grabbed the small table by her bed and smashed him over the head with it. She kept hitting him while her neighbor called the police after hearing all the noise. It turns out that he was the landlord and he'd been doing this to girls in the apartment block for a long time, just watching them sleep at night. That is extremely disturbing, but some of you may be pleased to know he ended up with a cracked skull, some teeth knocked out, a broken eye socket, and a broken nose. Well, that's what you get. Coming at number 8 now, we have the Handprints. A Reddit user said that one night in her second floor apartment, she was woken up by the sound of screaming outside. She got up to see what it was, but on her way to the sliding glass door where the noise came from, she passed the bathroom and noticed that the door was vibrating. She leaned in closer to see why it was shaking, and then she heard a big thump noise from the sliding door where she was originally heading. She went to the door, and to her horror, she saw the handprints of a child on the glass. She called her husband at work, who found the whole thing quite funny until he came home and saw the handprints himself. They still have no idea what happened. Next up at number 7, we have the nuclear attack. Little Dolly said that one day she was home alone studying for her exams when suddenly she heard a loud wailing siren noise from outside. Now her family lived next to a major military base, and the one thing that she had always known was that if the siren went off, it was something serious, something like a nuclear attack. She freaked out like any of us would. She grabbed food, water and some blankets and shut herself in a tiny hallway, the only area in the house without windows. She seriously thought she was about to die in a nuclear holocaust. After an hour, nothing had happened, so she inched her way out of her hiding spot and rang her mum at work. It turns out that the base had notified everyone in the area that they would be testing the siren that day. Her mum had just forgotten to tell her. Nice one, mum. Real nice. I'm scared just hearing about that one. Alright, at number 6 now, we have The Scream. One Reddit user said that when he was 12, he was left alone with his little sister while their mum was at work. They were playing with toys in his room when suddenly they both heard their mum scream from the living room. They were surprised because they thought she was at work, but when they ran into the room, she wasn't there. She didn't arrive home for a few hours later. If that wasn't creepy enough, get this. They both swore they heard her scream a name, but it was their own names. He heard his and she heard hers. Does anyone out there have a good explanation for this? Preferably a nice logical one that isn't as creepy as the story itself. Coming at number 5 now, we have The Note. M Soup said that one night when she was 19, she had a pretty rough, drunken night and returned to her home where she had a little bit of a self-confessed breakdown and shaved off all of her hair. After stepping out of the bathroom, she found a note in the hallway that just said, "I was going to leave you a note, but I see that you are here." She was terrified because she thought she was home alone, and there's this creepy note on the floor. But it got even scarier when she opened her bedroom door to see a man standing in the middle of the room in the dark with his face covered by his hair. She started screaming at the top of her voice until she recognized him. It was an ex-boyfriend from 3 years before who had run away from home and had heard that she was moving away and just wanted to talk to her before she left. So they talked and then eventually he left the house. She found out later that he had schizophrenia and was institutionalized. Not quite as scary as a murderer, but still a very disturbing encounter for sure. Alright, at number 4 now, we have The Demons. One Reddit user said that he was babysitting at a house in the middle of nowhere one night, which is already kind of scary. The baby was asleep and he was was watching TV waiting for the parents to come home, and then around 10 o'clock he heard a terrifying sound. He said the only way he could describe it was demonic laughter. A whole lot of demonic laughter coming from many different sources around the house. He started freaking out, running to the windows to see if he could see anything in the darkness. Eventually, it hit him. It was the sound of a pack of coyotes. He'd never heard a group of them together like that before, and they sounded eerily similar to a pack of demons. Alright, next up at number 3 now, we have The Picture. This is a short and not so sweet story from Madame Offfellow, who said that in her family home, her mum has hers and her siblings' pictures framed on a shelf. Now she is the middle child in the family, and so her picture was in between the other two. One night, her family left on a trip, but she had to stay back and work. A few hours after they left, she heard a loud smashing sound. She ran into the room with the pictures to see her frame, and only her frame, lying in the middle of the room with the glass everywhere. The other two pictures were still on the shelf. There was no way it could have fallen that far and with that much force, while the two pictures of her siblings remained completely intact. Who or what caused her pictures to smash is still a complete mystery to this day. Alright, next up at number 2 now, we have The Stranger. F- told a story where one night when she was home alone, there was a bang at the door around midnight. She lives in a rural area where the only visitor at that hour would be her boyfriend. As she looked through the side window, she could see it definitely wasn't her boyfriend, but instead a rough-looking, swaying man she had never seen before. He banged again. She backed away to go and get her phone. There was no signal. Her home phone was dead too, just like a horror movie. She grabbed the biggest knife in the house and locked herself in the bathroom, ready to pounce if the man managed to get in. She could hear him pounding on the side of the house, shouting, "Let me in, let me in." As she sat there, waiting, she remembered that her other home phone might still have some battery. She crawled out, found the phone, and yes, it had power. She called the police, who told her to stay in her bathroom and they would be there in 15 minutes. She said it was the longest 15 minutes of her life. When the police arrived, they arrested the man. He had been trying to get to a friend's party down the road. He had got lost and thought her house was his friend's house. She said this story is a reminder to always keep your phone charged. Mine's at 43%. And finally, at number 1 now, we have Fear. Reddit user Potentially True said that one day they were playing the video game Fear. It's a horror game that features a creepy pale girl that tries to jump scare you. He was playing this game in a dark room with headphones on to get the full effect. For some reason, he decided to look over his right shoulder, and there, standing in the dark right behind him, was a pale-skinned, dark-haired girl just like the one in the game. His heart nearly burst through his chest as his mind tried to figure out what exactly was happening. Now it turns out his roommate had a daughter who had come to visit. She had let herself into the room and was just standing there watching him play the game. I don't know how long for. I mean, I'm sure that is a relief, but only slightly. It's still insanely creepy. Starting off at number 10 now, we have Great Grandma. This one comes from Captain Kershaw. Now he said that one day he answered the phone to hear an elderly woman calmly and loudly say to him, "Tell Essie it is time to come home." He kept telling her that she definitely had the wrong number, but the old woman was adamant that he passed along that message. The only part of the message he actually understood was Essie. You see, Essie was the childhood nickname of his grandmother, but nobody had used it for decades. 2 hours after the phone call, he got a call from his grandmother's assisted living home telling him that his grandmother had passed away in her sleep. Now the grandmother, her mother, had died when she was just 16 years old, and suddenly it clicked for him. Now he believes that the voice on the phone was that of his great grandmother, telling him to tell her daughter that after all these years, it was finally time to come home. Moving on to number 9 now, we have The Count. This one comes from Reddit, where a girl said that she has a sleep talking recorder app on her phone. The app is just meant to be a bit of fun, to listen to anything you might just blurt out in your sleep. It only starts recording though if it detects sound, and usually she finds that it's just clips of her rolling around in bed. One night she was home alone. Her parents were out and her brother was at a friend's house. She woke up and saw that her app had a new recording. She listened to it and heard what sounded like a man with a German or perhaps Eastern European accent say, 1, 2. Now, when I first read this, I wasn't too sure about it, but then I found that she actually provided a link to the real recording. So, here it is. Let me know what you think. Well, what did you think of that? Do you think that sounds like a teenage girl in her sleep? What's your explanation for that? Let me know, please, because that's creepy. Next up at number 8 now, we have the artist. This one was posted to Reddit as well. A girl said that during summer 5 years ago, she was home alone one night when she heard the doorbell ring. She opened the door to see a man stood there holding a large square bag. He started talking about how he was an artist and was going to open up an art gallery soon. He told her he wanted to sell her some paintings for a low price just to get things started. She wanted to be polite, and so she let him open the bag and show her the paintings. After the first few, she realized they were all nude. Actually, they were beyond nude. The first one was impressionist, the second one was more photorealistic and graphic. The paintings became more grotesque and twisted with each one. Some contained gore and bestiality. The man just stood there flicking through them and grinning at her the whole time. At one point, he stepped towards her. That's when she blurted out that she didn't have enough money to pay for them and slammed the door in his face. She peeked out of the window a while later and he was still stood there. She shouted out that she was going to call the police, and it was only then that the artist walked away. Next up at number 7 now, we have The Note. When Reddit user M Soup was 19, her parents and brother went away for the weekend, leaving her home alone. She had a pretty rough night and was very drunk. For some reason, she decided to cut her long hair in a drunken effort to reinvent herself because she was moving away for university the following week. When she finished cutting the hair up to her neck, she stepped out of the bathroom to find a note on the floor in the hallway. It said, "I was going to leave you a note, but I see that you are here." She tried not to freak out. She walked to her bedroom, she opened the door, and there, standing in the middle of the room, was a guy with hair over his face, just grinning. She freaked out then and began screaming, and then she recognized him. It was a guy she actually used to date 3 years before until he ran away from home. It turned out that he heard she was moving away and just wanted to talk to her, which they did. He didn't hurt or threaten her in any way, but she found out 2 years later that he had been institutionalized with schizophrenia. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the angry man. This one comes from user not a sugar baby but okay. He said that his family home lies on a 200-year-old street. It's a popular area for tourists, and quite often they found tourists just standing outside their windows trying to get a peek inside the old house. It's annoying and creepy, but he got used to it. One night he went upstairs to go to bed and found a guy standing in front of the window. The windows are the original casing, so they've got heavy wooden interior shutters that close at night. He closed one side because at that point he was tired and he didn't care if this strange man could see their upstairs living room. Then he went to close the other shutter and the man gave him a furious look. It was a twisted, evil expression that was just dripping with rage and venom. He was so shocked by the man's face that he stopped in his tracks. The two stared at each other in silence for a few moments before the stranger's face changed suddenly to a creepy, leering smile. Then he walked down the street. The storyteller says he got up to check the locks of the house about 8 times over the course of that night. Next to number 5 now, we have The Beast. This one comes from Reddit user I Am The Cage. She did a great first person telling of this story, and this is how it goes. I was house sitting for my parents who live in the actual middle of nowhere. The closest neighbour they have is about a mile away. My parents had taken their dogs with them on vacation to the beach, so it was an eerie and silent house to be in. It was the kind of quiet that you wouldn't want to turn off the TV to, or you will be faced with nothing but the eerie sound of your breath and footsteps. On one completely pitch black night, void of any moon, I stepped onto the black porch for a quick smoke before bed. As I reached the bottom of the steps, I pulled out a cigarette from the pack and fumbled for my lighter. As I flicked the wheel, the glow of the small flame briefly lit up my surroundings. In that split second of brief illumination, it became apparent I was not alone. In a few seconds it took my brain to process the dimly lit image. I realized that I had just momentarily seen some massive brown-haired 4-legged beast eating from one of the dog's bowls by the steps leading from the porch into the house, and I do mean massive, twice the size of me at least, covered in some dirty brown human-like hair from front to back. I didn't make out its head, but I knew from that glimpse of its torso that this is something that I've never seen in the wild. As I stood there in fear from what was standing not 3 feet away from me, unseen in the blackness of night, it lets out some kind of deep, guttural grunt and plods off into the woods, shaking the porch as it runs away, leaving me scared and shaking in the pitch black dark with a still unlit cigarette hanging from my mouth. Very creepy story. It turns out that the beast may have been something to do with the reports of feral pigs in the area that she heard about later, but she's never been too sure. I hope it was feral pigs. Moving on to number 4 now, we have footsteps. Whiterun said that when he was a kid, he was home alone one day while his mum took his sister to school. Now after about 15 minutes, he heard the front door unlock, then open, and then came the sound of footsteps. They were slow and heavy and moved into the kitchen. He assumed it was just his mum, but even then he thought it sounded different. It sounded strange. Also, normally she would call out whenever she arrived home. To him, this sounded like a big guy with boots on. He called out to the footsteps, but was met with only silence. Now he was scared. He grabbed his dog from outside and the two of them hid in a corner of the house. After what felt like an eternity, his mum really did come home. He told her about it, and also the fact that he didn't hear those footsteps leave the house. The door was still locked, however, so were the windows, and there was no sign that anybody had entered. Not even a mark on the carpet from a shoe. Was that person still in their home? Were they even human? To this day, he has no idea what happened. And number 3 now, we have the cackle. Corby315 said that one day, when doing his laundry in his basement, one of the lights blew out. His basement was set up so that the laundry room is separated from the other side of the basement with a wall and a door. To get upstairs, you need to exit the laundry room and go through the other part of the basement. Since there was only one light on one side, it was always very dark. He finished the laundry and began to walk through the dark basement. As he exited the laundry room and got halfway through the basement, he heard a loud cackle. It was like the sound people make when they imitate a witch. In Corby's own words, he said it sounded like a witch who had been smoking for 50 years. It was a deep, raspy, hoarse cackle. That's what he heard, crystal clear, right behind him. He didn't look or hesitate, he simply ran for the stairs. Then Corby waited upstairs until his dad got home and changed that light bulb. He has not heard the cackle since that day and has never told a single person in the house about it. Coming in number 2 now, we have the figure. This one comes from Reddit user Definitely Not Satan. That's the kind of username that Satan would actually have. Suspect. When he was 18, he house sat for his parents while they spent a week away. He fell asleep one night but was awakened by the sound of talking. He looked to the other side of the room only to see that a small figure was breathing heavily, muttering and inching itself across the room towards his bed. What? He jumped up and just ran straight past it, all while screaming for his parents and telling them to get out of the house right now. After his parents calmed him down and got him away from the front door, they went to go and investigate. They found no evidence of the small muttering creature. His parents didn't believe him, but he still, to this day, swears that what he saw was 100% real. This one sounds a bit like the stories I've heard of people seeing fairies or like tiny people around the world, especially kids seeing them in their own bedrooms. But if you guys had experiences like that. And finally, number 1 now, we have the poltergeist. This one comes from Mickey on yourghoststories.com. Thank you, Mickey. He said, this story happened a few years ago and I am sad to say that it's a little bit like The Ring. My house is said to be haunted. Well, at least that is what I say. We moved here when I was 14. Since then, I always felt like I am not alone. Some nights I can see lights go on and off in my bathroom, or I smell horrible things when I'm awake in my house. But this encounter with a ghost was the last straw. It was a cold, rainy day and I had to let my dogs in the house before they froze to death. My mom and dad were both at work. They said that they would be coming home late, so they gave me a list of things to do in order to be safe or just to keep the house in order. But the list was long and I was not looking forward to doing all of the things when I could be having fun playing around with nobody home. When I was watching TV, I started to get the feeling like I wasn't alone after all. I felt a cold chill on my back and at the corner of my eye I started seeing shadows. I felt a little better when I saw that my dog was not barking or showing teeth at anything. I went up to get some lemonade out of the fridge when suddenly, as I walked forwards, it opened on demand. This is the part where it sounds like the movie The Ring. So anyway, I walked around the corner into the middle to see if I could see anything in the fridge. Nothing was there, so I just walked over there and closed it. But then I felt stupid because my lemonade was in there. After I got the lemonade and sat back down, I watched some more TV. As I started taking a sip, I could see the reflection of the kitchen in my glass. I looked at the glass trying to see the kitchen fully, and what I saw next made me have nightmares for a very long time. Looking at the glass, I suddenly saw this black creature run straight across the kitchen counter. I gasped, and right as I gasped, my dog jumped up and started barking like crazy and showing warning teeth. I leapt off my couch, and this is where things started getting freaky. All of a sudden my dog started moving his head like he was watching something dance or run. His head was moving across the ceiling and then back down to the kitchen counter again. Then my dog moved his head and stared straight at me. I screamed because I knew that this ghost was either right beside me or right behind me. I ran to my room upstairs and locked the door. I started crying out of fear and listened to my dog bark like crazy. Then all of a sudden, the barking stopped. My bedroom is big, but my bed is right in the corner near the window and the closet. I was sitting under the covers waiting to hear my dog bark again. It was all quiet. Then I hear my dog scratching and barking even louder now at my door. There was only one meaning to this: the ghost was now in my room. Next thing I know, I was woken up by my mother on the kitchen counter. She asked me what had happened, and I told her the whole story. She then asked me why I was found on the counter. I told her that all I remember was passing out in my bed. She looked at me and smiled. Then she said, "It's okay, sweetie, everything is fine now."